All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89, Chapter 116, Summer 1977, Part 3. Remus woke up and stretched beneath the bright canvas, Sirius breathing lightly beside him. It was a little bit too warm and sticky, but he wouldn't have moved for anything. Lying peacefully under the blankets, he could still taste the salt in Sirius's skin, feel his heartbeat. At the bottom of the sleeping bag, their feet were tangled together. Sirius stirred, screwing up his face before he opened his eyes. Morning. Morning. Fuck me, my mouth was dry. Yeah, mine too, Remus agreed, running his tongue over his teeth. All that cider. I could go and get some water from the pump. Yeah, we'll both go. Reckon anyone else is up? Remus listened carefully, then shook his head. He hoped Sirius wasn't worried about getting caught. Surely no one would question their share in a tent. What else could they have done? It was probably a bit early to start interrogating Sirius, so Remus held his tongue as they dressed quietly and quickly, fishing about in the bottom of the bed for their clothes, which seemed to have scattered in the night. Clambering out and blinking hard against the bright daylight, Remus thought that everything seemed to look different. The same, but not quite as he'd remembered it before. More realistic, solid and anchored down. They sauntered off in the direction of the water pump with their canteens, and as they walked, they fell into step, and Remus felt as though his heart would burst with joy. Stupid, really, such a small thing. The campsite was lovely and peaceful, sparrows darting between the trees overhead, and the occasional camper popping their head out and wishing a polite good morning to the boys as they passed. The water pump was by the shower block, and they both ducked in to wash their faces quickly before filling their canteens, as well as the others they'd brought. Shop sells pasties, Sirius said, thoughtfully, nodding in the direction of a little wooden hut with a blue and white striped awning. Shall we get some for breakfast? Return to the Camp of Zeros? Good idea, Remus smiled shyly. They bought far too many Cornish pasties, but they were fresh out of the oven, flaky and buttery and warm, and Sirius had no impulse control. Back at the tents, no one had stirred yet, apparently, so Remus and Sirius decided they would take their breakfast on the beach. They sat on a sand dune, side by side, munching peacefully and licking the grease from their fingers afterwards. I could get used to this, Sirius said, with a grin, rubbing his hands on his jeans, sighing happily at the view. The sand had been washed clean overnight by the tide. Everything was perfect and unblemished. Never been on a proper holiday before. Me neither. Remus wiped his own hands on his corduroy trousers and picked restlessly at the grass. Oi, Sirius said. What's up, Mooney? You said no worrying. Sorry. What's up? I was just wondering something. It's stupid, don't worry. They were quiet again. Remus fidgeted some more. He sighed. Why me? He asked, quietly. Why me, in the first place? Why not James, or literally anyone else? Is it because I let you? Path of least resistance? Obviously not, Sirius scoffed, frowning. What do you mean, why not James? I don't fancy James. You... Oh. I think we can at least admit we fancy each other, Sirius raised an eyebrow, thumbing Remus's hip through the thin fabric of his t-shirt. Remus nodded. Yeah, I just thought... I dunno. We never touched much. What? Before all the shagging, Sirius said, matter-of-factly. I used to wrestle with James all the time. We used to share a bed sometimes and everything. Not you. You kept yourself separate. No touching. I was... shy. It got me curious, I suppose. One Christmas, remember when Andromeda came to the Potters? I was really nervy, convinced my mother was going to come get me every 5 minutes. I jumped whenever the door went. I remember, Remus said, softly. 3rd year. Well, the door went, and I was bricking it. We were on the landing, I think. You sort of squeezed my shoulder and... well, it just felt really nice. It meant more because it was you. I felt like you'd, I don't know, chosen me or something. Couldn't get you out of my head for weeks. We were 14. So? You and Mary started going out not long after that. Yeah, look how that turned out, Sirius off to laugh. Remus laughed too, despite himself. Then, on your birthday, Sirius said, his voice faltering a bit, as if it was a difficult thing for him to talk about. You kissed me? I did, Remus replied, steadily. Sorry. I didn't expect it. It was so out of the blue. I'd been thinking about you before that, but I didn't really know. I didn't know that I was thinking about that. Then I thought, maybe it was my fault, like I'd given off some message, like I'd tricked you into it or something. What? No! Trust me, I very much wanted to kiss you. Oh, good. Because I just felt so awful about it, you know? It was your first kiss, and I went and mucked it all up. Remus sighed. Look, while we're being honest, you might as well know. It wasn't my first kiss. What? Yeah, the summer before, I sort of met someone. I never told any of you. I didn't want you to know I was queer. That boy, Sirius said, suddenly. At the Muggle squat in Mile End. His name's Grant, Remus explained. Well, I hate him. Remus laughed. That's okay. He's so nice, he won't even mind. I hate him even more. I ought to try and see him this summer. He's been so good to me. You don't even know the half of it. I'll go with you if you want. Thanks, that's kind. Moony, Sirius said, quietly. I'm really sorry about everything. It's okay. It's not. It is. It's not. Sirius, for God's sake, you can't even apologise without starting a fight. I'm telling you, it's okay. I was being unfair. I think I was asking you for something I don't even understand properly myself. Loyalty or love or whatever. I do love you, Moony. I love all of you. You, James, Peter. Yeah, Remus sighed. He closed his eyes, as if to reset the conversation. When he opened them again, Sirius looked anxious. Remus smiled reassuringly. Looking forward to 7th year? Dunno. Bit scary, isn't it? You mean the war? The war, Sirius agreed. Other stuff too. Last year before we have to grow up. Remus laughed softly. I don't think you'll ever grow up, Padfoot. I've been so selfish. Sirius had turned melancholy again. I said it's fine. It's not, though. His brow creased slightly as he searched for the words he needed. Remus held his breath, not sure what was coming, but somehow knowing he needed to hear it. You've so many secrets, and it must be just so shit keeping things back, Sirius began, gaining momentum the more he spoke. And I made it all worse. I just gave you more things to hide. I've loved keeping your secret, Remus wanted to say. I'd keep 1,000 more for you. He knew that this line of thinking could only make things worse, so he said nothing. Sirius risked reaching out, grasping Remus's hand and holding it. Remus squeezed back. It's not that I'm ashamed of you, or this, it's a million other things. I wish I could tell everyone. I wish I was ready. I will be, Moony, I promise. Sirius looked at him, full of pleading. Remus forgave him wholeheartedly. It wasn't difficult to meet his eyes anymore. James seemed pretty okay with me being queer, Remus prompted, quietly. He felt a bit underhanded, bringing up James. James belonged to Sirius. It wasn't Remus's business to interfere. Of course he was, the beautiful bastard, Sirius snorted. Fucking prince among men, isn't he? I know he'd probably be fine with this, even. He gripped Remus's fingers. But he's my best friend, and I just don't want that to change yet. I wouldn't want to be alone with him and have him wondering. Even if he wasn't thinking about it, I would be. Okay, Remus said. He was agreeing to everything. He knew it was stupid, but it was so easy now. "Morning, lads," Mary yelled from the campsite. Sirius pulled his hand back, quickly, giving Remus an apologetic glance. "Cheers for the pasties." They both turned around and waved at her. Sirius got up, extending an arm to help Remus to his feet. "Come on," he said, eyes twinkling. "I can't wait to rip the shit out of Prongs for finally getting his leg over." "Not in front of Lily," Remus cautioned. "She'll curse your knob off." "I can't have that. I'm very attached to my knob." "Sirius? Remus? This isn't just for the summer, is it?" Sirius looked at him and grinned. "I bloody hope not." Fortunately, no one was much interested in whatever Sirius and Remus had been up to the night before, because everybody else's night had been just as eventful. Peter gave him a bit of a wary look, but that might have been the hangover. Mary was grinning at everyone like a cat who got the cream, picking out a pasty and trying to catch Lily's eye. Marlene was bundled up in blankets, looking very green around the gills, and giving up the occasional moan. "All right, Miles?" Remus asked, gently. "Humph. Poor love," Mary tutted, patting her friend's blonde head gently. "Went a bit too hard on the old Rosie, didn't you? Still, could be worse. Dorcas hasn't come back from the loos yet." James and Lily were sitting next to each other, but not too close. Lily had scraped her hair back in a pigtail and was consciously trying to stare at the ground, eating a pasty with a kind of quiet resignation. James looked absolutely chuffed, but was trying not to show it too much. "So," Mary grinned, widely, looking around at everyone. "We'll stick with the new sleeping arrangements for the rest of the week then, shall we?" "Suits me," Sirius said, casually. "And me," Peter nodded, mouth full of mince. Marlene gave a silent, queasy thumbs up. James and Lily looked at each other, then looked away. Once everyone had finished eating, the girls arranged an expedition to the shower block. The boys followed after, towels under their arms, and Sirius teased James mercilessly. "No, go away, I'm not telling you anything," James laughed. "This is purely for academic purposes," Sirius chided. "It's going to be a matter of historical interest. Future generations will need to know what miraculous feats you had to perform in order to finally convince Evans to—" "We just talked." "Oh, so the silencing spell was for—" James turned bright red and disappeared inside a shower cubicle. Sirius chuckled triumphantly. "Doesn't anyone want to know about me and Dorcas?" Peter asked, innocently. The castle ruins were about 5 miles walk, which nobody seemed to think was too far at all. Marlene had perked up a bit after showering and eating, and everyone decided that fresh air was probably the best cure for a hangover. They zipped up their tents, stuffing valuables into rucksacks, along with some leftover pasties and bottles of water, and set off around 11. They followed a footpath along the shoreline, which curled around and gradually steepened into a cliff. The view at the top was breathtaking, but Remus was struggling to enjoy it much. His eyes watered and his legs burned with the effort of clambering uphill. Sirius, Marlene and Mary had raced to the top, Marlene coming in first despite her queasiness. James surprised Remus by slowing down to match his own shambling crawl. "All right there, Mooney?" he asked, cheerfully. "Brilliant," Remus panted, not sure if he was pulling off sarcasm or just sounded like a terrible liar. "We're in no rush, take it easy." "Humph. Padfoot wasn't too much of a tosser last night, was he? About the whole, about the stuff he told us?" Remus shook his head, focusing on breathing, and the horrible grind-click noise that started happening in his hip every time he stepped forward. "Good," James nodded, relieved. "I just worried he might be. You know what his family was like about that kind of thing. Wasn't two minds about leaving him alone with you, to be honest. But I thought you'd just give him a thump if he got out of order." "Everything's fine," Remus wheezed. "Don't worry." "Good," James said again, and stopped, because Remus had. Just for a moment. The other 6 had crested the hill now, and were disappearing down the other side. They'd only been walking for 20 minutes, Remus thought grimly. He wondered if he could apparate Ed, but the deliberation part would be difficult, without a map or having seen the place before. He was embarrassed, having James stay back with him, but but at least it wasn't one of the girls. "Sorry," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Usually not as bad this far away from the moon." "It's fine," James shrugged. "We're on holiday, not a route march." "Don't you want to catch up with Lily? I'll be fine." "Giving her a bit of space. I think she's embarrassed." "She really likes you, though," Remus said, encouragingly. "She told me." "I know," James smiled, getting that dopey, dreamy look as he stared over the cliff top. "Can't believe my bloody luck." He cleared his throat. "But it was just talking, all right? That's the party line. Don't say anything to Black." Remus laughed, straightening up. "I won't." They began to walk again, steadily. The sun was reaching its highest point, blazing above them so they had to squint or look at their feet. "We talked about you, actually," James said. "Well, Lily did. I listened." "Oh. Yeah, nothing horrible, I promise. I think it was probably just the cider, and we were both rambling about how you were such a good mate, and then she said something about being brave and making your feelings known and living honestly, or... Oh, I dunno. I was too busy being amazed she was even talking to me." Remus smiled at James and wanted to hug him on Lily's behalf. They reached the castle 2 hours later, a good half an hour behind the rest of the group, who had waited for them. "Sorry," Sirius said, once they were out of earshot of the others. "I didn't think." "I'm fine," Remus smiled, trying to hide his exhaustion. "I had prongs." "There's a local bus that goes back past the campsite. I checked," Sirius said, gallantly. "We can get that back if you want." "I'm fine." The castle was a ruin, beautiful grey stone in the summer sunshine, cast against the glistening sea hundreds of feet below. Remus could barely believe anyone had really lived there. The narrow spiral staircases had crumbled and led nowhere. Long grass and bright yellow dandelions had invaded what might have once been a great feasting hall. There were arrow slits in the remaining walls and graffiti carved into the parapets, where no doubt some bald soldier had waited once 1,000 years ago. Perhaps he hadn't been much older than they were. War never changed. James, Peter and Sirius began a very enthusiastic sword fight with some stray sticks they'd found, while Remus sat rolling up cigarettes on a pile of rocks, watching them. "You'd feel a lot fitter if you didn't fill your lungs up with that shit," Marlene tutted. "Here for a good time, not a long time, Miles," he replied, dryly, licking the adhesive strip on his paper and sticking it down carefully. He made 4 or 5, just to pass the time, took them neatly into an old matchbox he'd saved for the purpose. He watched Sirius, playing the knight against Peter's dragon, and laughed as James captured Lily, apparently now a princess, hoisting her effortlessly over his shoulders and running for the castle gates. She laughed and beat her fist against his back playfully, and when he put her down, she looked so happy in his arms. Eventually, some of the other tourists started to get a bit annoyed with the 8 teenagers mucking about, so they decided it was time to go back down to the beach and spend the rest of the afternoon cooling off in the sea. Lily and James led the group this time, hand in hand, chattering happily as if they had been this intimate for years. A pang of envy shot through Remus. Not that he wanted to hold Sirius's hand. For one thing, it was much too hot. For another, you couldn't keep Sirius still long enough. "You lot go ahead," Sirius called. "Me and Mooney are having a fag break." Marlene tutted once more, but hurried to catch up with the others. Remus and Sirius sat on a stone wall for a bit, smoking. "There's a pub down there," Sirius nodded further up the lane. "Saw it on the way up. It's got a garden. Want to go and waste some time?" "Yeah," Remus said, surprised. That sounded ideal. "Don't you want to catch up with James?" "James doesn't love me anymore," Sirius sighed, dramatically, holding his wrist against his forehead like an old woman about to faint. "His heart has been claimed by another." Remus laughed, then dared to say, "Oh well, you've got me." "I've got you," Sirius nodded with a grin, hopping down from the wall. "Come on then, could murder a pint." The pub was a small whitewashed cottage with mustard yellow shutters, a red tile roof, and a neat row of red geraniums planted in pots outside. Inside was dark, musty and cavernous. Remus had to duck under the low ceiling. The gruff working men propping up the bar all turned to look as they entered, and for a moment Remus wondered if it had been a bad idea after all. Still, Sirius ordered 2 pints of beer, and they took them outside to the garden, sitting on a table underneath a beech tree for shade. As they headed out, the surly barman and unfriendly locals turned back to their own drinks, obviously deciding to ignore the 2 boys. Remus was sure he heard one of them mutter, "Bloody toughs," which he took as a personal slight, though of course it could have been much worse. Still, they were alone in the garden, and had the privacy they'd been seeking. Sirius was impervious to the attitudes of others. Maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he just didn't think muggles were worth worrying about. "It's great here," he said, gulping down his foggy warm beer. "Do you think we could live here when it's all over?" "I like London," Remus replied. "It's what I'm used to." "Remember you promised we could go to Carnaby Street," Sirius said, playing with Remus's matchbox. "This summer. I'm holding you to it." "When did I say that?" "Christmas." "Oh, right. Okay, we'll go." "I can't believe you forgot." "Well, you also spent half of Christmas trying to convince me to get a girlfriend, so—" "Ugh," Sirius groaned, apparently in shame. "Sorry. I thought it might help me feel less attached to you. Sounds a bit bonkers now that I think about it." "Now it sounds bonkers?" Remus kicked him gently under the table. "Logical thought processes are not my forte, Mr. Mooney," Sirius laughed, with an aristocratic turn of his head. "You ought to make your peace with it if we're going to, start going out," Remus prompted gently. Sirius gave him an apologetic smile. "Going out, yeah," he agreed. "Sorry." "You'll get there," Remus said, casually, gulping his pint. And with that, the ice was broken, and they began to talk, and talk, and talk. It was that easy. After months of failure to communicate, it seemed that the gates had now been flung open wide. They found that once they had begun, they couldn't stop. Remus would relate some assumption he had made, some belief he had held about an interaction long ago, and what he thought it meant at the time. And Sirius would shake his head with wide, earnest eyes and say, "But Mooney, it wasn't like that at all." When it came down to brass tacks, Remus had discovered that much of his misery was his own making, that most of the time Sirius had never meant harm, and hadn't often known he was causing Remus any pain at all. It was just his own bungled idea of what was going on. They even talked about Mary. "I really did like her," he said. "I think that's what threw me off in the beginning. You know, it wasn't like girls weren't doing it for me in that apartment, and she was so confident. I thought you were just with her because you didn't want to be with me." "No," Sirius said, firmly. "It was for her, not for you." He looked at him. "Sorry." "Ha! Don't be. That makes me feel better, actually." "Anyway," Sirius smirked, "what about you and Mary?" "Oh, God." Remus buried his face in his hands. "Don't. I'm so embarrassed." "It's fine. I liked it." Sirius raised an eyebrow, giving Remus a look so sultry it would probably get him arrested in some parts of the country. "I noticed," he blushed. "Didn't help you feel less attached then?" "Apparently not. I couldn't believe you didn't mind that. And yet, when you found out about Chris—" Sirius straightened up, looking annoyed. "Him," he grumbled. "There's nothing between us. We're just friends. And this other bloke, Grant, was he—" Sirius shifted, obviously uncomfortable, as he struggled to get the word out. "Your boyfriend?" "Not really," Remus replied, easily. "It's hard to explain. He's a friend. I care about him as much as I do you and James and Peter and the girls." "More secrets, Remus." Sirius ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "I can't keep track. I don't know how you do it." "Can you stop hiding stuff? From me, at least?" "I don't know," Remus said, quietly. "It'll be hard." "But you can try," Sirius smiled. Remus chuckled and nodded. They finished their drinks and decided to head back to the campsite. "I'll teach you to swim," Sirius offered. "Fuck off, will you?" Remus snorted. Is there anything else you've been keeping secret, Remus? Sirius nudged him, as they meandered slowly downhill. It was much easier, the way back, but they were going very slowly anyway. Nope, Remus laughed. He felt light as air. It was like being high, having nothing to hide at all. Queer, illiterate, homeless, werewolf. He ticked them off on his fingers. I think that's it. Oh, and my mother. Your mother? I got a letter in that box of depressing stuff from Dumbledore. Photos and a letter, an apology. Oh, blimey, okay. What did it? No, I don't want to talk about it yet. Sorry. Fine, Sirius shrugged. Let's say we can talk about anything at all except our mothers. Perfect, Remus nodded.